Hello and welcome to the Talking NorCal Podcast, the official podcast of Active NorCal. I am your host, Zach O'Brien. With me here, as always, it's Bob. How you doing, Bob?
Bob here. I'm good.
Bob is here. He's good. We have a fantastic episode today. Quite frankly, our interview today is probably the smartest, most qualified person we've ever had on this podcast. We have Joanna Nelson. She is the Director of Science and Conservation Planning at Save the Redwoods League. She is one of the ultimate experts on forests, specifically fires within forests and prescribed burning and all that cool stuff. And it's great timing with the KNP Complex Fire going on in the Sequoia National Forest right now. So we talked about everything from that fire to the forests of Northern California to how we can manage our forests better within climate change. So we had a great conversation with her. Before we get into the pod, we have a lot of news. This is brought to you by the Active NorCal store. Go to store.activenorcal.com. Use the code NorCal to get 10% off your first order in the store. We got shirts, we got hats, we got sweatshirts, we got everything.
Show the camera your shirt. You got the Tahoe Strong shirt.
So, by the way, this is our Tahoe Strong shirt that we released for the Calderfire Fund. We raised $1,300, something like that.
Nice.
We're going to continue to do these fundraisers with our apparel. I am working with some local screen printers to see if I can get the cheapest possible thing, so they will essentially donate us the shirts, and we can use all the money we are selling for these T-shirts to give to whatever organization we're choosing. We're working with a lot of different nonprofits to hopefully raise some money for some really cool stuff. So this was the Calderfire Fund, and it's helping, people repopulate and people that lost their homes in the Calder Fire. So yes, this was a lot of fun. This is a great T-shirt. It's no longer in our store, but thanks for everyone who bought it. Once again, store.activenorcal.com. Use the code NorCal in the store. We really have some cool stuff, and we are going to keep adding to it. Buy a hella shirt, buy
hella merch.
Buy anything. We got a ton of stuff: stickers, hats, shirts, T-shirts. Code NorCal, 10% off your first purchase. Let's hop into this episode with the Tahoe's Hella NorCal.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to do kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal.
We have so much to talk about. We actually recorded our last podcast early because I was at a conference, a media conference in Denver last week. And shout out to the Super Niche Conference, my friends over there, Ryan Dorn, great people. I learned a lot, had a lot of fun. But, because it's been sort of this long, 10-day break, so much happened. So we're just going to bang through a bunch of these stories, and the first ones come, we got some new names and some potentially new names in Northern California.
Names is what the first two stories are all about. The first one, Squaw Valley announces brand new name, Palisades, Tahoe.
We've been talking about this forever. They didn't really tell us when they were going to announce the new name, and then they just came. I was hopping on my flight for Denver, and the news came out, and I banged out, this tiny little article announcing it right before I got on the flight. But I think it's a great name, Palisades. One of the definition of Palisades is a large set of cliffs, and that's essentially what Squaw Valley is. That's what it's known for, is its large, steep terrain. Their logo is an eagle, which is representative of the Washoe tribe, and that's sort of their call out to the Native Americans. And anyone who doesn't know, squaw, the term quote unquote squaw, is a racist, sexist term for Native American women. And they've been deliberating this decision for decades, and they finally pulled the trigger. They got a new logo. They got new color scheme. It's kind of crazy to actually see it in person after talking about it so long. What do you think about the new name?
honestly, when I first read this to read aloud, I saw the first word being squaw and I hesitated. So I know that I'm moving in the right direction as eliminating that from my vocabulary. And that's really what this is all about. I hear henceforward we'll be referring to that word as the S word. So if we ever need to mention that particular word again, we will refer to it as the S word.
I'll say, so as soon, and they did a bunch of reaching out because there's like over 100 businesses in that area.
They got to rebrand.
Named that. And
Right.
as soon as I'm sure they were coordinating with all these businesses, because as soon as they, announced the name and they changed all their Instagram handle and their Facebook page and their Twitter handle, all these other places did as well. So it was a coordinated effort to eliminate as much of that word as they can in one swift, So you're right. I do think there's probably some businesses, some stuff out there, the valley. What do we call the valley now? It used to be, it's an actual valley. I don't know like exactly how we're going to determine what things are called and what things aren't. But yes, we're almost there where we can just eradicate that word from our...
Yeah, I mean, the only time we used it was when we referred to that particular area. And so if they're going to rename it, great. But yeah, literally when I went to read it just now, I saw that word, the S word, and I hesitated. So we're moving in the right direction with regards to eliminating these derogatory terms from our culture.
Yeah, I mean, I've used that word for so long, so it doesn't feel, it doesn't have that connotation of feeling...
Well, we didn't
terrible,
know about,
but we know it is.
We didn't know back when,
of course
were growing
not.
up, that it was a derogatory term. It's with kind of the reemergence of America, if you will, that these things are kind of being pointed out.
It's, and of course, this was met with plenty of dumbasses in the comment section saying you're erasing history, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we're erasing racist history, like not erasing it. We are not glorifying it any longer, right? It's, it's, I always go back to, you won't see a statue of Hitler in Germany, right? They have plenty of museums of the Nazi Party in Germany, but you don't see a statue. They're not glorifying anymore. Of course, we'll never forget. And same with this. Let's not forget the terrible atrocities that happened to Native Americans in this region with the Washoe tribe and in the entire, Northern California. But, they've picked a name that I think is really indicative of the mountain, and they picked a logo that is a shout out to the Washoe tribe. I think it's a home run. Unfortunately, we have to listen to these people in the comment section say all this crazy stuff about why we're erasing history. We're not erasing it. We're simply not glorifying a racist, sexist term.
Yeah, our country and the world is moving in the right direction away from these derogatory terms. I mean, look at the football team, Washington, D.C., this country's capital, their football team has done the same thing, rebranded, and are now... They're actually going to pick a name here soon. I do know, but
I don't know.
Right now, it's the Washington football team. But the next story is also.
Well, wait. I'm not done with it.
Continue.
So, I actually like what in the announcement what they said, and this is really how I feel needs to be described, and they did a really good job with the announcement. The Burn, the Palisades Tahoe president and COO said, "At the end of the day, squaw is a hurtful word, and we are not hurtful people." And I think that is the number one thing we could take away. It doesn't matter what you think about this word or how long it's been sitting there. I mean, it's been called that through the Olympics, the 1960 Olympics at S Valley. Yeah, I guess we
got it. You're moving in the right direction.
We are at S Valley. I've researched so much about that Olympics, and that word comes up so much, and so there's so much history behind it. But at the end of the day, it is a Native American word that was used to say bad things about the Washoe tribe, and the Washoe tribe wanted this change. And so to me, there's no history erased. We are helping them out. And by the way, they are building a partnership with the Washoe tribe. They're doing these education tours. They're teaching, they're trying to do all these programs to teach the public about the Washoe tribe and their history in the Tahoe region, which dates back, probably 6,000 years. So, whether you like it or not, this was a really smart business decision from the management team because they no longer have to deal with an upset tribe who they are trying to work hand in hand with. They no longer have to deal with an upset, public who deems this, like I did, who deems it a racist, sexist term. And I love the name, and I'm really happy, and I really think it rolls off the tongue, Palisades Tahoe. So I just wanted to say that. The Majestic Eagle logo is awesome. I think they did a really good idea. The only other name they could have gone with was Olympic Valley, but that it sort of lacked creativity, and it sort of held on to their past a little bit too much, where now they're moving forward into the future. I really liked it. Okay, that's all I had to say.
That's all you had to say?
This is a huge deal. We've been talking about it forever. We've polled audiences what they think they should name it. We've done all sorts of things, and now they come out, and I think they hit a home run, and that's all I'll say.
Enough said, right? The next story is a similar name story. California officials want to change the name of Patrick's Point State Park.
Yes, Patrick's Point holds a special place in a lot of people's hearts. I think it's a very popular place to camp in Humboldt County on the coast. It's beautiful. Essentially, it's in the mid 1800s, there was this person, Patrick Began, who they sort of named the area after. The names Patrick's Point was already used when the state parks purchased the land in 1930. As it turns out, Patrick Began was accused of murdering numerous Native Americans, and he, was not a friend of the Yurok tribe, in which, that's the historic land of the Yurok tribe. So they want to rename this, and this is being supported by the governor's office, is being supported by the state parks. That they're really trying to push for this. They want to make it the Sumeg State Park. So that could be, they said there's two ways you can say that, Sumeg or Sumeg. And I believe it's talking about some woman in the tribe. Is that correct?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Great question.
They don't really, it's definitely it's a Yurok cultural name. And, there's plenty of Native American history in that park. And, I'm trying to, okay. Well, it's basically honoring the cultural, and linguistic relationships of the Yurok tribe with, with the people, the white settlers who came in. So I support this. And this one's difficult too, because I do like Patrick's Point. It rolls off the tongue. I've known that name. It's hard to move on from these names we know so well. But this is another, this is part of their state of California's trying to move on from a lot of these names. Let's just do it now and get it done with. So 10 years down the line, we don't have to deal with it anymore.
We're rebranding America.
We're rebranding Northern California for the people who originated here, the people who we brutally stole their land. So, again, we'll see. They're now they're asking for public input, and I'm not exactly sure how they vote on this. Right? It's I'm sure they put this to some sort of vote. It's a village. There it is. Sumeg Village is
found it. Got it.
Was
all happening live,
planned
folks.
and built by the Yurok people. So anyway, it's let's just get these things done with, and it's unfortunately a lot of these people who came into the area and renamed all this stuff, these white European settlers, whatever, were treated Native Americans really poorly, and so
that was accepted back then. But it
was accepted back then, and now we're learning how terrible it was, the genocide, the everything. So we're not changing history. We're not sweeping it under the rug. We're simply not honoring people who did these terrible things that we know are terrible now.
Totally agree. I absolutely support this as well.
I'm sure we're gonna get a lot of comments from people, saying, "I'm who cares? I'm sick of it." Like it's
like and subscribe.
It's a good business decision. It is, and that's. Let's forget
the entire country is doing this. Like, it's not just Northern California. There are a lot of places that have historical value that are being rebranded into different names because the people that they represent turns out maybe not the best people in the world.
Well, I'll say this. So you think, they're taking this away and they're renaming it something you like. Think how the Native Americans felt 200 years ago. Right. When it was literally stolen from them. They were killed. They were put in reservations, and it was complete. This land that their grandparents, their entire lineage is, and you're completely changing it. Imagine how they felt. So history was already changed once. We're just changing it back to what it should be. So that's that. Hit me up in the comment section. I don't really care what you have to say.
At Zach O'Brien. Okay, let's get to the non-name news of the week, shall we?
Okay.
First story, the KNP Complex Fire moves into the Sequoia National Park, something we all feared.
Yeah, and we actually talked with Joanna about this here in our interview coming up. So you remember we talked about the Castle Fire? It burned 10 to 14% of all sequoias on the planet.
Right.
Well, this is another fire that's going to, continue to, hurt redwoods, and these trees have a natural fire retardant to them, but they're wrapping these trees, and that it's hard to get any information from this fire right now. Everything's closed down, and it's just like any of the fires. It's any information we can get is from photographers on the scene, is from firefighters on the scene, or any news that Cal Fire or the National Park Service releases to us. But these are the world's largest trees. Like General Sherman is the largest tree in the world, and they wrapped it with fire retardant wrap. Kind of a surreal thing to see. And not only that, this is the second national park in California that is actively burning right now. It's kind of crazy.
Unfortunately, we're going to continue to see things like this happen, and these big redwoods threatened more and more year by year. But you can see the firefighters kind of tackling it in a different approach, whereas it's like, it's probably going to come. Let's do what we can to prevent as much damage as possible. Literally wrapping trees in foil blankets that will prevent them from burning. Never seen that before. They're wrapping these wooden signs that are kind of historic in value, and they're just going and they cut line all around the giant part of those, the bulk of those big giant sequoias. So they really are trying to protect history, but I mean, year after year after year, these fires are getting worse and worse. And so, I mean, inevitably they're going to burn. Some of them are going to burn. And yes, they do have that kind of natural fire retardant to them, which is why they have lived for so long. But if the drought conditions continue in California, it's just going to get worse and worse.
Well, it's so, and I don't want to give away too much of Joanna. I really enjoyed our conversation with her so much because she's so smart and knows so much about this. But yes, these trees have evolved to have this natural fire retardant, but they have never seen fires burn this hot in our history. And I mean, these trees are thousands of years old. I mean, these sequoias were literally alive when they were building the Roman Empire. So and that's the reason why they're so old and so big, is because they developed this natural fire retardant, and they, this healthy low heat burns that naturally occurred throughout history with lightning have allowed them to, become so fire retardant. But, these fires are different than we've ever seen. And it's kind of crazy to watch. Right now, it doesn't seem like there's too much damage to these trees, but it's just hard to say. I've seen pictures, and really that's it. I think they're probably hesitant to give out too much information too early. If they say, oh, they're fine, and then they go up in flames, that's a bad look for them. So, but it's crazy. And, they're wrapping the biggest tree in the world.
It looked comical because it's like, I don't even know how high up that goes, but it looks like it's like an inch compared to how big that tree is, because they just are wrapping the bottom of it. I mean, that tree is absolutely gigantic.
Yeah, and you probably didn't see the picture. I saw one there were literally like 20 guys wrapping it at one time. It's the biggest tree in the world. Like, people don't understand how big it is until you're up close next to it. There's 20 guys, and they are, the fire retardant wrap that they're putting on, it probably goes up 40 feet.
No way.
It's
40?
Maybe I'm exaggerating.
That seems extreme.
But the, let's see, General Sherman, 275 feet high.
Yeah, it's a big-ass tree.
Has a circumference of 103 feet. It's 103
That's
feet
so
around.
Insane. Holy shit,
So
that's insane.
those pictures look, it looks like they just put like this little bubble gum wrapper around it, right?
Just around the very bottom.
Yeah.
But it's not going to, I'm sure doesn't go up 40 feet, but it probably goes up at least 25.
By the way, we speak with Joanna, and she explains why they just wrap the bottom. Obviously, they're not going to wrap the whole thing,
Right.
But she explains the whole science behind it and everything. So,
But it looks comical. That is such a big tree.
Yeah.
That little, it's like, what's that going to do? But
I got to show you the picture of like 20 firefighters with that little foil, because it really puts things in perspective how big these trees are.
We hope the trees survive. It is starting to cool off. It was a dramatic shift in the weather. So this is fire season. We're officially in fire season now. So all we can hope for is some rain.
We're recording this on Tuesday. It is critical fire weather right now, but not down there. So we could see fires starting around Northern California, but it does seem to have gotten more mild down in that fire.
All right, let's go to the next story. This one's kind of cool. Mysterious sunken boat revealed on the low shore of Shasta Lake.
Push the button, will you?
Rain dance!
The drought. Here we are. We're talking about the drought and fires again. To me, this is something in 2015 that was really fun about the drought, is we got to see. I am so fascinated with the town that sits 400 feet underwater, Kennett, California, and at Shasta Lake. And we're starting, we're not, the Kennett is at the very bottom. We probably won't be able to see those structures ever unless, everything's completely drained someday, which I suppose doesn't seem that far off anymore. But, this, we're seeing highways, we're seeing tunnels, we're seeing all this different infrastructure from the time before Shasta Dam was built in 1940, whatever, mid 1940s. But this is interesting because this is a boat, not a ski boat,
Very unique boat.
not a fishing boat. So, it's sitting over by Bridge Bay. It's just been revealed from the low waters. What do you think the boat is?
I don't know. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I'm not a boat expert by any means, but I saw it and I was like, that's definitely a different boat.
So I followed a post on Facebook, and our friend Matt Doyle was on there talking about it, and a couple other people who seem to know the lake really well, and they think it's an old World War II landing aircraft.
No way.
Yes, because these aircraft used to gather driftwood on the lake to keep it from getting to Shasta Dam, from building up on Shasta Dam, right? So, and he even said in this comment section, I'm not quoting him directly, that in high water, these before the dam was built, that these things could maneuver up the Sacramento River, So
that's supposed to be a plane?
No. Some sort of landing aircraft, some sort of World War II military aircraft.
I mean, when you...
Not aircraft, boat. Landing boat. It's not a plane. I'm sorry. I kept saying that.
Wings?
I'm an idiot.
Because the wings are definitely not there. That makes sense.
Yeah.
It looks military-esque. It very much does.
It's got like the flat top, so you could load driftwood on there and pull it out. So
it's like a military wood hauler.
Right. It was used in World War II. And this is a hypothesis, right? We don't know exactly what it is or what it was used for. I would love to see, this was like the initial, pictures we're seeing of it. I'd love to see, some sort of expert who knows the lake and the history of it to go check it out. People said it could be used to, transfer humans like around the lake back in the day. You get a bunch of people standing on the whatever. This is before patio boats or,
like a ferry, if you will.
But it
looks like you can load big ass wood logs on it. So that makes sense. But when you said aircraft, I was like, wait a minute, let me go pull this up.
No.
It's not an aircraft. It is a boat.
But they used to maybe land aircraft on it. This is what I read. It doesn't make sense by looking at it. Yeah, but this is what people say. Maybe it's just a section. I don't know. But
either way, the thing is badass looking.
It's so, how the hell did that thing get, that's what your first thought is. What is that World War II boat doing in the lake? It's crazy. But this is the fun part of the drought, as terrible as the drought is. And, we have to find our silver linings because there's nothing, we can do until it freaking rains. Push the button, please.
Let it rain.
And so I'm enjoying the history. I've really, been really into the history of Kennett, California. It was a freaking boom town back in the day, right along the Sacramento River, right along the railroad tracks. And there were bars and there were hotels and everything, and now it's completely underwater. So it's cool to see some of the infrastructure of that town now with our bare eyes,
Yeah, Kennett, California. I'd love to see somebody scuba dive down there and get some like GoPro footage.
I'm sure people have, but it's got to be so murky down there. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I just, even if you're having lights, I doubt you could see it. By the way, you're probably going to run across some 600-pound sturgeon too, so that's probably pretty scary.
Well, this next story is some good news. The first snow of the season on Mount Shasta has laid its first little blanket.
Fantastic photos are coming out of Mount Shasta, with a dusting of snow. It's a decent dusting. Beautiful, such a great sight to see. We usually see a little bit of snow early September or late September on Mount Shasta, but this precipitation helped with all the wildfires. The Calder Fire got a little bit of rain. The Dixie Fire got a lot of rain. The Dixie Fire, by the way, is, as we're taping this, up to 90% containment, which, maybe that means they stop it from becoming a 1 million acre fire. But it also helped with the Monument Fire and the River Fire over on the North Coast. So, while this snow, it's so beautiful to see, and like we've talked about, they think, some people were postulating whether Mount Shasta was without snow for the first time ever seen by modern day humans. And now hopefully we'll never see it like that again this year.
It sucks that it's such big news when just the smallest amount of precipitation falls in Northern California. I mean, I was talking to the winemaker I work with the other day that I drove home to a sunset that actually had clouds for the first time, and I don't even know how long. Like, I looked up in the sky, saw clouds, and I was like, what the hell are those things I'm not familiar with? So it's great. Obviously, we want it to continue. The more rain we get, it's better for literally everything around here. It'll put fires out. It helps the snow helps with the people wanting to come in and snowboard and recreate in the Northern California snowy areas. The rain, then that snow melt goes into the rivers and the lakes and helps, recover these, revealed sunken boats from the bottom of Shasta Lake. And it allows the fish population to continue to thrive or start to thrive again. There's so many things that we talk about on this podcast that could just problems that could be solved if it just rained. If it
just rained, yeah.
Rain dance!
Hey, maybe that's helping.
Let it rain!
Maybe that's helping.
That's why I made them.
And so, we wrote about this on activenorcal.com, and, we put it in the scope of hope. Is this the first indication of the beginning of the end of fire season, right? Which I'll put caution in the wind here. The most destructive fires, not the largest, the most destructive fires in California's history have occurred from September to December. So you look at the Camp Fire, you look at the North Complex Fire last year, where a lot of homes were burnt, and not to discount, the fires that burned homes this year, but the most destructive fires that move the quickest are October, November, early December.
On years we don't get precipitation.
Correct. So if we were to get rain, it's over. We're dancing in the street,
totally.
But if we don't continue to get this rain, we're far from over. We're far from out of the woods for wildfire season. So just throwing caution to the wind there. This is awesome, and we all enjoyed this little. I don't want to call it a break. It's a little, some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, I suppose, of this historic wildfire season, the biggest wildfire season in California's history. But, we're not out of it yet. And in fact, I believe this week they're doing more PG&E shutoffs. So
it's been windy.
It's been windy. Yeah. That's from the storm,
right?
The storm that brought, so it's this weird. We're almost there, but we're not quite there yet.
It's cooling off, which is good, but the wind is not good.
Right.
And with those rainstorms, sometimes you have lightning storms, which are exactly the opposite of what you need. So either way, it would be so fantastic if we could button up this fire season with a strong just storm. It hasn't happened like that in many, many years, but, we can hope.
But this is, seeing Mount Shasta with snow on it is a start. I'll just say that. Good to see. Keep rain dancing.
Yeah, what's great about this particular episode is we're ending with 3 positive stories. That was no.
Oh, was that on purpose? I didn't do that.
No, but I'm looking at the stories and they're all positive. We tend to talk about the drought and the negative things, but first, snow on Mount Shasta, fantastic news. Next story. The state of California is acquiring 27,000-acre outdoor utopia along the Great Redwood Trail.
So this actually went up for sale a few years ago. It is the descendants of the late stock market titan Dean Witters, who bought this massive property, and it straddles kind of the Trinity Mendocino counties. It's got this 16-mile stretch of the Eel River. And I believe the family was trying to sell it for an absurd amount of money. Only really a billionaire could afford such a thing. Wait, I have the price right here, and
this is called stalling.
No. So the family asked back in June of 2018 for $31 million for it. Which it's this beautiful ranch property, and they have 27,000 acres, and you have, all this great wildlife and everything. Seems they didn't get any takers. So now the state is appropriated $10 million to buy it. And I suppose they're going to make it into some sort of state park, I'm not sure what, since the state's buying it, it's not going to be a national forest. It's not going to be a national monument, right? So it'd be some sort of state park, perhaps. I don't know. But it's kind of cool to see this returned to the to the public.
Well, that $10 million allocated is what's coming from the state. It's a $25 million.
Oh,
purchase.
I see. Okay.
And that $10 million is all they needed to secure it because they've had private donors fill the rest of that $25 million.
I'm seeing that now. Wildlands Conservancy
right.
Has purchased the ranch portion of it for $4 million.
And the $10 million secured the rest of that property. But you think about it, it's 27,000 acres of beautiful property for $25 million. That's $1 million for 1,000 acres. I mean, honestly, that's not. They're not asking the world. It's a beautiful, magnificent area. We love seeing it go to the state because they're just going to try to conserve it as much as possible, maybe turn it into a park like you said. But this is great news. And the family they wanted to get rid of it. They didn't need to own it. They wanted the whole $25 million is a good chunk of change to split within a family, but it's really not an absurd amount of money. So I love the story. I love that we're going to be just kind of keeping this little area as untouched as possible.
Yes, this is a rare opportunity for us to acquire land like this for the public, and of all the terrible things that our government sometimes uses money for. I personally believe this is a good thing, right? This is let's when this is owned by the descendants of a stock market titan. I'm having trouble speaking today. I don't know what my problem is. You can't go on the property. You can't enjoy that 16-mile stretch of the Eel River. You can't do it. I'm sure there's swimming holes and fishing and it's because not a lot of people go on it. The wildlife is supposed to be crazy, right? Is what I hear.
I mean, like if I had his money, I'd love to own a piece of land like this. But and I'm sure he enjoyed it. But his family are like, we don't need this anymore, and so it's. I'm glad that it's going to be protected by the state.
We need to find some land like this and do like an active NorCal, GoFundMe to buy it for just our followers. You have to follow Active NorCal. So you have to subscribe to this podcast to be able to go hiking at that.
We'll call it Hella Public Park.
Hella Parks.
Hella Parks.
But yeah, like you said, this is a good acquisition in my opinion. I'm sure some people will disagree with that, but we'll see what they do with this. This is an ongoing story, but it looks like we'll be able to use this piece of land here shortly.
The final story of the day, another positive one, which again I love. Brand new elevated boardwalk opens at Grove of Titans in Jedediah Smith Redwoods.
So this is a joint effort between the California State Parks, the Redwood Parks Conservancy, and surprise, surprise, the Save the Redwoods League, who we're about to talk to on our interview. It's this delicate area surrounding the Grove of Titans and the Jedediah Smith Redwoods, and the elevated trail is to keep the delicate region from people trampling all over it. And I knew that they were building a new trail out there. I didn't know it was going to be elevated. I didn't know it kind of reminds me of like those walkways in Star Wars where they're like walking across the vast, even though it's just barely hovering over the ground. But this is a way to have hikers enjoy the area without trampling over, the plants and the different wildlife that make it so beautiful.
We're seeing more and more of this, more and more of these elevated kind of hiking areas that just showcase the magnificence that is this Jedediah Smith Redwoods, all the big ass trees we have here in Northern California. So I love seeing this. It's just more of an area that's really, it is a tourist attraction, if you will, but it is built to, continue to let nature be nature and not really let, humans' footprint destroy it. And so this is what I just love it. I love to see any areas that we can keep pristine in nature. I'm all for.
So let me ask you, what do you think of the people who say this is kind of overreaching and it kind of ruins the experience of being on a trail in nature?
Well, the purpose is to not let
to preserve nature
and to like, let's walk on the man-made stuff and let's leave the, earth-made stuff to be. And so we can enjoy the beauty that is nature. Hiking trails take away from nature. They need to be built. They need to be maintained. This has been built, but it's not something that needs to really be maintained that much, in that it's not going to hurt the environment. It's there to have an elevated view of nature. And so I think it's great.
Yeah, I guess it's a weird, we're trying to enjoy nature, and sometimes that means not walking on like a metal walkway, which I understand. And don't get me wrong, I fully support this project, but there were some people in our comment section who were saying, well, doesn't this take away from the quote unquote nature of it all? And I understand that, that thought process, although I never understand negative people hopping in comment sections for no good reason. But it's yes. Let's see if they do more of this. I mean, we saw it at Bump as Hell where they did the elevated, but that's for safety, right? So this is more. They saw the impact that humans were having on this area, so they say, well, let's just elevate it. It's interesting. Like, let's see if we continue to see different boardwalks like this, and let's see how people react to it. Again, I get it. I get what they're trying to say. It's like, oh, I don't want to walk on this like metal.
You're adding man-made structure to nature, so it takes away from eye appeal, but it's meant to protect nature and conserve that area and its beauty. So yeah, I mean, I understand, but I love seeing things like this where they're just trying to protect the pristine, gorgeous landscape that is Northern California.
The other options, the two other options are mess up the ecosystem or close it to the public. So I do think this is a good, we're meeting in the middle here, but I just wanted to mention it because I sort of get what they're saying, and I never thought about it that way because I'm like, oh, cool, they're protecting wildlife, they're protecting nature, and I suppose humans are just selfish, and I think everyone falls in that category, and in this case, we can't be so selfish about
this. Well, what you're getting when you go there. You're not anticipating to go hiking and not see man-made structures. There are plenty of places in Northern California that you can go to do that. So in this particular area, it's a little bit different. You want to go hiking out in nature for a couple of days? Go to Yosemite.
Yeah. Well put. And these trees are super unique. The Jedediah Smith Redwoods is probably the most underrated place in all of Northern California, and that's probably a good thing because it definitely it flies under the radar. Not a lot of people are up there. There's also the Redwood Curtain you got to go through to get there. It's way up in the top corner of Northern California. So it's cool what they did, and I'm glad that people can enjoy this area once again.
3 final positive stories. Love to see it. That is it for the news of the week.
Okay, that is it for the news of the week. Let's go to our interview with Joanna Nelson. Again, she is the Director of Science and Conservation Planning at Save the Redwoods League. We had a fantastic conversation about forests, and specifically her what she specializes in is fire. So this is perfect for today. Let's go to our interview with Joanna. Okay, I'd now like to welcome on a very special guest. We have Joanna Nelson. She is the Director of Science and Conservation Planning at Save the Redwoods League. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, Zach. Thanks so much for having me on.
So I don't want to say this is good timing, but it's certainly relevant, you coming on today with the KNP Complex Fire happening in the Sequoia National Park. And I think you're probably the perfect person to talk about this with. I know this must be a really hard time for you, with what you do and the fire moving in. What's going through your mind right now with that fire as it moves into one of the great forested areas in the world?
As this fire moves into giant forest, just like you've said, this is devastating. This is worrisome. And one, little light I see is, for example, in giant forests, there's 40 plus years of prescribed fire and restoration thinning. So land care and land tending works and helps. And also what's going through my mind is this is climate disruption. So the past 6 years before this year, we saw the 4 biggest fires ever in the giant sequoia forest. So there's both, we have ways that we need to act that are direct land care, restoration thinning, prescribed burning, being able to respond, and then that we have a responsibility to act on climate and get to zero greenhouse gas emissions.
Yes, I do want to talk about, the fires that are going on now, because I think it's turned into this bigger discussion, and it's turned political, which is never good in my opinion. With the Sequoia National Park, I saw they were wrapping the bottom of these sequoias. Why is it they just wrap the bottom? Is it because that the most damage comes from the low side of the trunk?
So that's called structure wrap, and that's used in fire defense for buildings, in this case for the trees. One reason they're just wrapping the bottom is that comes from scientific research, for example, from Dr. Nate Stevenson and others, that if you can protect that lower part of the tree, that's going to help the most for the tree not dying from the top, right? That's going to help an active layer of growth cells survive. And also, even though canopy fires can kill trees, there's a lot of heat retained at ground level. So insulating at ground level is a really good place to protect.
I see. That makes sense. So these great trees that we have in Northern California, the sequoias and the redwoods, they are, I think the public perception is that they're somewhat fireproof. How much truth is into that, that tale that they are completely fireproof, and that's why they live so long?
Right. So there's a lot of accuracy in that story, right? It's really important. So both coast redwood and giant sequoia evolved with low to moderate intensity fire. And I'll just repeat that part: low to moderate intensity fire.
Different than we see today.
Different than what we're seeing today.
Yeah.
And so, for example, giant sequoia are fire dependent to reproduce, right? So in terms of defense, they have really thick bark that insulates them from fire damage. Their cones open at high heat, releasing the seeds. And then the seeds germinate well in bare mineral soil. So soil where the duff on the top has been burned away. And there are bare areas. So that's the setup. In order to keep on going as a species, they need fire. And coast redwood, for example, respond to also have really thick insulating bark, respond to fire damage by resprouting from the base. That's something, and they can even resprout from up the trunk. And that's something that giant sequoia can't do. But so I'll return to that low to moderate intensity. Throughout thousands of years, there have been lightning strikes that start natural fires, and there's been thousands and thousands of years of indigenous cultural practice and using fire as a sacred tool to maintain landscapes. So all of that, yeah, that's accurate scientifically, culturally, historically, and right now we're getting catastrophic fires, high severity. So our fires are coming faster, burning hotter, burning larger areas, burning further into the soil, further, more of the trees, and that's what they just can't handle. So giant sequoia, instead of enduring for centuries, the large mature trees are dying, the cones are getting burned up, the seeds are getting burned up. That's the mortality.
So the fire that moved through the Big Basin redwoods, I guess it's been 2 years now, right?
Just last year.
Oh, it was last year.
Yeah, CZU was last year.
We've had so many fires in the last 3 years. I have trouble keeping up with all of them. So that burned at a higher temperatures, higher heat. So would that fire have accrued more damage than the fires that those redwoods have experienced over the last couple hundred years?
Yes, exactly. And that fire behavior and fire effects can be really patchy. So their big basin is a California state park. One state park north, Butano State Park, burned at a much lower severity. And a Save the Redwoods group actually just went hiking there this past Saturday. So one, 15 miles away, it looks really different in terms of severity. And yes, Big Basin burned at a really high severity, and there's a lot of recovery to enact.
So, I guess we can get into this bigger conversation of fire and sort of what's causing it and how we can help. So, you hear all this political talk about, it's, you got to rake the forest or it's climate change, right? And, I've tried to maintain it's a combination of both, right? We have to have great forest management, but also we've set ourselves up pretty poorly with human caused climate change. So what can we do moving forward to help our forests, and to both from a management perspective and from a climate change perspective?
Thank you. I agree with you strongly. It's both. We need to do forest management and we need to take climate action. And in terms of forest management, that looks like doing land care and doing stewardship. Well, what's that? That again is restoration thinning. We have forests that are overgrown with a second growth or sapling stage. We have 100+ years of fire exclusion, fire suppression. And it looks like doing the preparation work for prescribed burning. So before you can light a fire on the ground, called broadcast burning, you need to not have the conditions where you're starting a conflagration, right? So you do fuel reduction, you might burn fuel in piles, you might make biochar, you need to get some of those fuels out before you can restore a prescribed fire burning regime. And we need to look to Indigenous cultural practitioners and collaborate well with them without taking what they know. So there's a great podcast called Good Fire. Amy Christensen is First Nations and leads that podcast. And that's a space, and others here in California with the Yurok and the Karuk and the Hupa tribes, and the Amamutsun tribal band, where I hear conversations about really good collaborative partnerships and then real concerns about Indigenous folks bringing forward what they know with dominant culture and having it taken.
Yeah, we hear this all the time, right? The Native Americans did it right because they lived here for thousands of years. And I love Native American history in this area. I mean, Northern California it was like, they think it was the most heavily populated area before white settlers in North America. But we don't have to get so specific on the details, but what is it that they do differently, or that they know that we're just not practicing very well?
So I'm gonna, as usual, be really mindful that I am non-Indigenous and white, so I'm not speaking for any Indigenous practitioners.
Sure.
And having had the honor of working with people, I've seen, so I'll bring out names. So Bill Tripp in the Department of Natural Resources in the Karuk tribe has done a lot of speaking with the media. Margot Robbins is the executive director of the Cultural Fire Management Council, and I believe she's part of the Yurok tribe. The Amamutsun tribal band is in the south of San Francisco Bay and around the Monterey Bay area. So what I've seen working with tribes is that they are learning, or some use the verb relearning their traditional knowledge, or sharing traditional knowledge that they've had unbroken access to They're looking at ecological timing of burns, so looking to what tan oak is doing or particular species of oak for acorn. And so interfacing that with agencies and a different calendar can be challenging, right? You're checking with the California Air Resources Board, you're checking with CAL FIRE for their red flags to be able to notice what's happening ecologically and respond and start a burn, right? So those are things that I've noticed.
I see. Last thing about fire, hopefully, that I wanted to ask is the Castle Fire. Last year, it burned, I think it was 10 to 14% of all living sequoias on the planet.
Yes.
What sort of overall impact does that have on our planet? Is that something we just can't know? I mean, we obviously know they have a great, positive impact on our Earth, and so what could we see from that sort of catastrophic loss moving into the future?
Right. So I'll start with that. That is an estimate, and it's a good estimate in a report led by doctors Nate Stevenson and Christy Brigham. And there were contributors from Save the Redwoods League, and people are doing more accurate counts now. So just to say where that number comes from, and then I'll keep going with the bigger question. So there's one place in the world that giant sequoia grow, and it's the Sierra Nevada in California. That's it, right? So and they grow in patches. So depends on who you talk to, but there are 70 plus groves of trees, and losing 10 to 14% of them in 1 year in one fire event is just not sustainable, right? If you play it out, we can't do that 10 times in a row. And we've lost genetic diversity that we're still learning about. What is the genetic character of the trees that we lost compares to the trees that we have. We've lost habitat, we've lost mature trees that have their own place in forest structure. We've just lost these majestic beings. And so that kind of loss is hard to take. And then to have this fire happening again, and just to reiterate, it's not that forest scientists and managers sit around and get startled by every summer fire season. People are working year round to reduce the risk of catastrophic fire. We just get preempted sometimes in our plans with yet another fire.
We're now playing catch up, and we can't keep up with how bad things have gotten, and it's terrible. And I'm not sure how much you know about Active NorCal, but we started off as just an outdoor magazine, and now with everything closed, we report on fires, and it is what it is. So our world has changed, and I think everyone in this area specifically has changed in terms of what we can enjoy, and if the days are smoky or whatever. So it's been sad to see, and it's really hard to deal with, but we got to just keep moving forward. Okay.
And I wanted to say, I think it was your September 8th episode, you mentioned that we're either talking about droughts or wildfires when we talk about NorCal. So, yep.
It's true. I grew up, salmon fishing, and now it looks like we're going to have a huge die-off of salmon, and they're all intertwined, right? They're all intertwined with climate change. Yeah. And I've certainly never, I'm young, but I haven't seen anything like this in my life. So, and I don't think we have for centuries, certainly not this human caused climate change. So, okay, I do want to move on to a more positive topic, because I do love the forests of Northern California, and you having such a crucial role in Save the Redwoods League. I'm curious about your story. What brought you into this life of science? Like, were you a science nut when you were a kid, and then you sort of moved from there?
I've always done and been interested in environmental care. Yeah. And as a kid, I had so many interests, and one, so I was a humanities and science nut in terms of what I studied. But one thing I can point to is both my parents were naturalists. So my late dad and my now mom. And so we'd be out. So I grew up in West Marin and West Sonoma counties. And we'd be out right after a rainy day or in the rain, checking out what comes out in the rain, right? Banana slugs and mushrooms. And so I really appreciate that instead of when it's classically nice out, right? We get out all the time. And they worked since the inception of Audubon Canyon Ranch. So that's an egret and heron rookery on Bolinas Lagoon in Marin, and now has a fire forward program of prescribed fire. So there's that early instilling it. And then, yeah, just consistently studying environmental science in order to make the best difference. And so I did an interdisciplinary program called Earth Systems at Stanford University for my undergrad and my master's. I worked for 4 years. I decided I was going to do a PhD in science, and that opened the door for me to go to Alaska. So I worked in rural, roadless Alaska on what are the impacts of climate change on wildfire pattern in the boreal forest, and then what does a changing wildfire pattern mean for people who are primarily Native Alaskan in the Koyukon Athabaskan group, who are fishing salmon, who are hunting caribou and moose, who are gathering berries. And so that's, and bringing it back to my home, you know, my knowledge of homelands here in California. So that interest in fire. And then, you know, from this point, after 20 plus years of studying fire, I've been certified as a prescribed fire lighter for 2 years. So that certification is the basic firefighting cert, the wildland firefighter type 2, and involved with the prescribed fire training exchange network and getting to put good fire on the ground.
Awesome. What attracted you to Save the Redwoods League? Because I feel like sometimes the impact of the league flies under the radar, at least for a lot of people up in further Northern California. I think it's more recognized in the Bay Area. But what attracted you to a group with so much history and that does so much for the area?
Yeah, I work in science to action. And that means for me in my career, what do we need to know in order to do better now in stewardship, right? Roll out what we know now. So it doesn't mean waiting 10 years for a better research answer. You know, when that comes out in 10 years, we'll learn about it. But it means what's a snapshot of what we know now and how do we use that to do conservation? And I just really admire that Save the Redwoods League has this go for it mentality of we will protect and work on restoration for coast redwoods throughout their entire range. So from the south, that's Big Sur in California, all the way up the whole coast to Southern Oregon, and the whole range of giant sequoia. So the ability to track where might these forests move to in the new conditions of climate disruption? What are the threats throughout everywhere that they grow? And so that ability to, again, make a difference in conservation, to work with tribes, to, again, engage with tribes on how do we care for land, and how do we, again, respectfully collaborate and make things better for forests and people. That's something that really drew me.
You really struck me with what you said. With climate change, do we expect the redwoods to move? Do we expect them to creep up. I don't know if it would be north to find a suitable climate in the warming temperatures.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really interesting, and the broader picture is in the northern hemisphere. Generally, we would expect species to move northward and up in elevation, right? In the northern end of the coast redwood range, they're doing pretty great, and they're doing pretty great with the changes. The southern end of the coast redwood are a little more stressed on the dry and drought end. So the forests will do different things throughout their range. And then, it's not as cut and dried as everything that I expect to grow together will move lock, stock, and barrel, right? Right. Like,
wow,
I'm going to go for a hike, and there's going to be bay laurel and live oak. And then in the canyons, there's going to be coast redwood, just like there was when I was a kid going hiking, right? So they may disaggregate. And one term for that in ecology is novel ecosystems. We're going to see different combinations of species. Another term in this is assisted migration. Is it up to people to transport organisms, especially that couldn't transport themselves because they're stationary as plants, or because there's a barrier, major freeways for wildlife? And that is a societal value question. Is it up to people to help organisms get to where they could grow better in terms of climate and water availability?
That is so fascinating. I went fishing on the Trinity River last year, and they have all sorts of different, projects to move gravel around for spawning beds. I guess the question is, at what point do we let nature be nature and find its way? And at what point do we help guide it? Because to me, sometimes it feels like we do too much.
So that's another really interesting question of values, and knowing that when we say, let's just let nature, without me making the decisions, right, for our collaborative world, when we say, let's just let nature take its course, except we're raising the temperatures of land and air, and we've brought in invasive species, and we've excluded fire to the point that now we have fuels built up, nature
and built dams, and
it's pretty intense to take those consequences. So in order to say, we have intervened, and now, and people do intervene in a bunch of ways. We care for land and expect, reciprocally to be cared for. And so in the number of ways we've intervened in the past, we've set up a situation now, and we have goals, and we want to check on how we're doing in terms of those goals. And we do make choices about intervening. And a lot of those are for stewardship, for like, we take care of land. And sure, we have a bunch of different opinions on how to take care of land. You get different management plans or ideas if you're managing for different things, like, I'm all about salmon. Well, I'm all about something else. Sometimes those go right together, and sometimes they don't. Yeah.
It's fascinating because, the decisions we make, and we're seeing decisions we made 50 years ago, we're seeing the impacts of that, whether they're negative or positive, right?
Yes.
So there's so much at stake with these types of decisions. It just fascinates me. So I would like to talk about the redwoods of Northern California, because I do think a lot of locals don't necessarily appreciate them maybe like they should. I had my family came in from the Midwest, and the first thing they went to see is the redwoods. And that's a lot of my friends locally wouldn't feel the same way. Why are the redwoods of Northern California and the North Coast so unique? Why are they so old, and why do they grow so tall?
Those are great questions. So I think I have more. I don't know so much of the why. And
sure,
I can turn it back to you as a comment. We have these trees that are incredibly long-lived, right? That we can know with the giant sequoia, right? That 3,000 years ago, here were these trees tended by indigenous people at the same time the Romans were building their architecture, right? Just that, or you go to a state park and there's the big giant section with tree rings and they're labeled back of, here's when this historic event happened, here's when, and that tree has seen it all. So just the ability, I don't know what your family said, but to be in the presence of trees that are that tall and that are that old, and what it brings for us in terms of how we respond to beauty, or whether it brings us feelings of peace, or something else entirely of just, whoa, this is so new, I'm still wrapping my head around it. But that's, it's really, an honor to be in the presence of these trees.
Why is Save the Redwoods League, it's so important for this? Because it's I see all the news coming out of the league, with all the money they're putting in. How important is it for us humans to help these trees survive and thrive in the modern age?
I think it's really important for people to come together and help these trees survive and thrive. And I think, we can respond to some of the challenges, again, that we've brought with habitat fragmentation, with old ways of logging that, with clear cutting, with practices that are really destructive. And there are working forests today that have more of a science basis and a sustainable practice. So we can have working forests and an industry around products and not decimate forests and soil, right? We can protect the species that rely on the redwood forest. So in the coast redwood, the northern spotted owl, marbled murrelets, which are really cool. The one seabird that I can think of that nests in old growth forest on land. Pacific fisher, which is related to weasels and wolverines. So we have an active role in saying, this is how much is in protected land. So public land might be state parks, might be federal lands, might be, again, sovereign nations of indigenous people, or land that's otherwise held in trust for indigenous people. So we can look at where are these forests protected and where are they not, and decide, again, on that balance of what we're looking for.
I just think it's so important. And I would like to end with the hardest question I probably have for you. Because you mentioned the owl, the spotted owl, and it's become controversial because it is protected in areas that we would like to manage. From someone who is a prescribed burner and for someone who knows so much, how can we juggle the wildlife while also making areas safe and communities safe from wildfire?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right that it's a tough question. And I think there are so many ways, right? It's easier said than done. And there are so many ways to protect life, right? And to not set it up as this owl or your job, right? Because that's a really artificial setup, right? And that we need a planet to have jobs, right? It is that, so setting up artificial fights isn't worthwhile. And so having forests with a structure where there are tiny seedlings and young saplings and trees that are in the middle, and then really old trees with a structure that supports denning for these mammals, the fishers that supports nesting. And then beyond that, the dead trees that again have cavities, have holes in them that make denning habitat. So it's about different life stages for animals. And I know very well that sometimes you have enough water for salmon or you're diverting it to something else, right? It's not like if you just say something holistic, it's going to happen. But it does matter if we choose a frame that's collaborative, and if we choose a frame that says we can have work and admire spotted owls, and we can respect their lives while we respect each other's lives. It happens, so it's possible. Yeah, and I would like to add my own answer to an earlier question. One of the hardest, and we know what to do, which is just, you mentioned it's forest management and it's climate change. Yes, it's forest management and it's climate disruption. And just wanting to say that how we meet climate disruption is collective action, right? Sometimes we get split up into, your individual actions in the place you live. It's collective action. We can work towards international action and national action. And when those fall apart and we're not in charge of them, sure, we go to regional, we go to community level. And I just really love what people have to say. So some of my climate heroes, Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who's right now chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy, Doctors Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and Catherine Wilkinson, who started the All We Can Save project, Mary Anais Hegler and Amy Westervelt, journalists and writers who created the podcast Hot Take. And there's this collective, find your superpower and tap it into climate action, because we need everybody.
Well, I really appreciate the work that you do. And I'm not envious, because you do have to deal with some really difficult topics. It's a difficult time for human beings, because we created this problem, and now we and future generations have to fix it. And it comes with some really difficult questions. And as we're seeing with wildfires, really, it's really hard to deal with. So I really appreciate you coming on. If anyone wants to donate to Save the Redwoods League, I'm having trouble with that today. It's savetheredwoodsleague.org, correct?
SaveTheRedwoods.org, where Save the Redwoods is all one word. Yeah.
Yes, and just a fantastic organization. I don't think most people know even a fraction of the amount of work you guys do in the forests in Northern California and the surrounding areas. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Zach. Thanks for this podcast and getting the word out to people who love Northern California in so many different ways about the environment and water and fire.
Joanna Nelson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Joanna Nelson. Again, probably the smartest person we've had on this podcast. I mean, we have fishing guides, and we have photographers, and we actually got a scientist on to discuss climate change I was finally vindicated, because I always say these fires are a combination of poor forest management and climate change. And she agreed with me. Boom. I got vindicated by an actual scientist. So I'm stoked.
We're all a little bit smarter after having heard that interview.
Yes. And yeah, she was so nice and kind. And so thank you, Joanna. I don't know if we'll ever have someone that's smart on our podcast again, but that was
never
great.
Say never.
Never. So that's it. That's it for this episode of the Talking NorCal Podcast. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast: Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. We're everywhere. Hit that subscribe button. We appreciate the support. We're going to continue to get I got some really good interviews coming up that I'm really excited about. it's funny as we've been building this podcast for a while, and it certainly hasn't been like our top priority with the entire Active NorCal brand, but we've been working and trying to stay consistent with it, and we're starting to see some high quality interviews come through, including Joanna, who we just had. So I'm excited. We're going to bring you more and more interviews as much as we can from people who are out in the field and doing really cool stuff in Northern California. Again, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are on YouTube too. You can watch this whole video podcast on the Talking NorCal YouTube page, as well as highlights on the Active NorCal YouTube page. While you're at it, follow us anywhere on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You can follow Active NorCal and Talking NorCal for all of our fun highlights. Did I cover everything?
Hopefully.
Well, this is an interesting time in Northern California right now, and let's push that button one more time, Bob.
Brain dance! Let it ride!
And thanks for listening. And remember, stay active.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little mental when we visit Sacramento. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we protecting nature's bounty when we visit Humboldt County. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and me, I'm hella cool, 'cause I live in Sebastopol. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal,